You shouldn't even be alive anymore, just sucking my energy dry. Lucas's words still clawed at my mind. The marinara sauce on the floor a grotesque stain, like blood. My own blood felt like ice. I stood there, frozen, staring at the boy I'd once cradled, sung lullabies to, the boy I'd sold my life for, the house holding every memory of my Arthur. Lucas was gasping, his face a twisted mask of rage and something else. Shame. His eyes, so like my son Chris's, now burned into me as if I were a stranger, an unwelcome ghost. "Grandma, he began, but I was already retreating, fumbling for the door. My legs gave out, each step down the building stairs a monumental effort. 68 years had never felt so heavy. Or perhaps it was just the crushing weight of my broken spirit. You must be wondering how it came to this, how the light of my life, my own grandson, could hurl such venom at the woman who'd sold her very home to make his dream a reality. It began 4 years ago, the day Lucas got into medical school. I can still see him bursting into my apartment, eyes alight with triumph, though that light quickly dimmed into a flicker of worry. "Grandma, I got in!" he'd cried, pulling me into a fierce hug. "But I don't know how I'll pay. Dad says he can't afford it. Chris, my son, a good man, but always adrift financially. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, a clinic secretary, her meager salary barely stretching to cover their basic bills." I looked at Lucas, at the boy I'd watched blossom, and the decision was made before the thought fully formed. "But I can pay for it," I said, the words leaving my lips before I could second guess. That very week, the for sale sign went up. The house where I'd raised my 3 children alone after Arthur left us. Every corner a living memory. The pencil marks on the wall, charting their growth. The kitchen doorframe where Arthur had carved our names in a heart. The garden where we'd planted roses every Sunday. My daughter Brenda was the first to erupt. "Mom, have you lost your mind? Selling the house for Lucas? What about Chris? Why can't he pull his weight?" "Your brother has his own family to support," I countered, my voice firm. "And Lucas deserves this chance. And the other grandkids? What are you going to sell when my kids need college money?" The question hung, a bitter echo. I had no answer. Perhaps it was unfair, but Lucas had always held a sacred corner of my heart. My first grandchild, he arrived when Arthur's absence still felt like a raw wound. That baby, he brought the sun back into my life. The house was gone in 2 months. I moved into a cramped apartment, 3rd floor of a walk-up, in a neighborhood that whispered of forgotten dreams. But I didn't care. Every weary step up those stairs was a step closer to seeing my grandson, Dr. Lucas. In his first year, Lucas still came often. He'd lug his enormous textbooks, tell me about anatomy, about his professors. I'd make his favorite, spaghetti and meatballs, and we'd talk for hours. "Grandma, you can't imagine how hard it is. So much to study." He'd sigh, rubbing his tired eyes. "You'll conquer it, my boy. You always had a head for things." I'd watch him, bursting with pride, hunched over books at my small dining table. Sometimes he'd drift off, and I'd gently drape a blanket over his shoulders, just like when he was a child sleeping over. 2nd year. That's when the shift began. Visits thinned, calls grew shorter. My calls often vanished into voicemail. "He's busy, Mom," Chris would assure me. "Med school isn't easy." I nodded. I understood. But a prickle of unease whispered that something more than just studies was pulling my grandson away. On one of his rare visits, Lucas seemed to shrink into himself, His eyes darted around the apartment, lingering on the peeling paint, the threadbare sofa, the ancient TV. "Grandma, are you comfortable here?" he asked, his gaze avoiding mine. "I'm perfectly fine, darling. What matters is your comfort." He nodded, but his eyes held a flicker I couldn't quite name. Shame? Guilt? It was a shadow I couldn't grasp. Later that day, fetching more juice from the kitchen, I overheard Lucas on the phone. "Can't make it tonight, man. I'm at my grandma's. Yeah, the one paying for med school. It's pretty basic. I'll tell you about it later." I feigned deafness, serving the juice with a practiced smile. But a cold shard had pierced my heart. After that, visits became a ghost. Lucas always had an excuse. Exams, papers, shifts at the teaching hospital. My texts often met silence or a curt emoji. A thanks, Grandma. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, never bothered to mask her jealousy. From the time Lucas was small, her comments were barbed. "You spoil that boy rotten, Susan." "Lucas, you don't need to be at Grandma's every weekend. Your grandma isn't your mother, you know." At first, I brushed them off. Then, I began to withdraw, to avoid friction. Perhaps that was my first mistake. Perhaps I should have fought for him. Third year, Lucas moved into his own apartment near campus. Chris called with the news. "Mom, Lucas is on his own now. We found him a small place, closer to the university." "That's wonderful, son. Can I help? Furniture, maybe." "No need, Mom. Amanda's already taken care of everything." A sharp ache twisted in my gut. Not even a thought of me. Still, I paid his tuition, religiously. Every month I walked to the bank, made the transfer. Sometimes it meant store-brand groceries, cutting out my morning coffee, or foregoing the hand cream that soothed my arthritis. But I never uttered a word of complaint. It was for Lucas, for his future. 3 months ago, the news hit. A persistent back pain had sent me to Dr. Peterson. I dismissed it as age, a tired spine. But when I returned for the test results, his face was a grave pronouncement. "Susan, we found something in your pancreas." The words that followed drifted from a great distance. Cancer, advanced stage, metastasis, less than a year. "No treatment?" I whispered, my voice a thread. "We can try palliative chemotherapy to reduce the pain, but it's already widespread." I floated from his office, a sleepwalker. I told no one. I wouldn't be a burden to my children, already burdened by their own lives. And Lucas, especially Lucas. I couldn't bear for him to visit out of pity, or worse, to accuse me of using my dying breath to control him. I clung to my routine, a fragile normalcy. Groceries, neighborly chats, calls to my children. The only change, a growing dependence on painkillers. Each day's pain, a sharper claw. Then, last week, a foolish impulse. I decided to surprise Lucas. I cooked his favorite spaghetti and meatballs, packed it in a Tupperware, and headed to his apartment. I hadn't called. The last few attempts to arrange a visit had ended in last-minute cancellations. I reached his door just as his agitated voice cut through the silence. "I can't take it anymore, man. My grandma won't leave me alone. That old woman thinks just because she's paying for my med school, she has the right to show up whenever she wants." The world tilted. That old woman. Me. The grandmother who'd sold her home for his future. The one who'd skimped on food, on comfort, so he could have the best textbooks. The one who, soon, wouldn't be here at all. Still, I knocked. When Lucas opened the door, his face drained of color at the sight of me, the food container in my hands. "Grandma, I didn't know you." I brought your favorite lunch. I cut him off, clinging to a thread of dignity. Then I saw them. Papers scattered on his table. A transfer application. To another university. Out of state. My heart, already a bruised thing from the illness and his cruel words, plummeted further. You're transferring? I heard my voice, thin and trembling. I was going to tell you, he mumbled, eyes fixed on the floor. And the tuition? It's more expensive there. That's when he detonated. Lucas hurled the container to the floor, the red sauce exploding across the hardwood like a fresh wound. I never asked you to pay for anything. You do it to control me, to make me feel guilty. You shouldn't even be alive anymore, just sucking my energy dry. And so, here I was, stumbling from my grandson's apartment, my legs failing, my heart shattered, his words a relentless echo, a nightmare I couldn't escape. I went home that day and wept as I hadn't since Arthur's death. I wept for the love squandered, for the sacrifices unseen, for an ingratitude that gnawed deeper than the cancer devouring my flesh. The next day, a cold resolve settled in. I went to the bank and transferred every last dime I possessed into Lucas's account. Enough to see him through medical school, even at that pricier university. Then I sat at my table and wrote. I told him about my illness, about the dwindling time. I omitted his cruel words. I wouldn't burden him with that. I explained he was free, that the money was a gift, untethered. Love, true love, doesn't demand, I wrote at the close. It simply gives. Be happy, my grandson. That's all I ever truly wanted. I sealed the letter, leaving it on the table. Tomorrow, before leaving for my sister Brenda's in the countryside, I'd mail it. Tonight, by the window of my small apartment, I gaze at the stars and think of Arthur. Soon, we'll be together again. I think of my children, the other grandchildren who may never truly know the depth of their grandma's love. And I think of Lucas. He doesn't know my greatest wish was simply to see his face one last time before I left this world. Not for gratitude, not for guilt. Just to etch that memory into my soul, to carry it with me when my eyes close forever. But perhaps this is better. To slip away in silence, leaving only love. Never a trace of bitterness, because in the end, what truly matters isn't what we gain, but what we poured out. And I poured out everything. No regrets. Tomorrow, with the sunrise, I begin my final journey. No goodbyes, no tears. Only the quiet certainty that I loved with every fiber of my being. But what will Lucas feel when my letter reaches him? When he learns his grandma is dying, far away? Will he finally understand that love isn't a cage, but the truest freedom? That, I'll never know. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The pain in my abdomen was a sharper claw, as if my body knew this was a day for final goodbyes. 2 pills, just to rise. I surveyed the small apartment, never truly a home. Bare walls, no family portraits like in my old house. Only one photo remained on the nightstand. Lucas at 5, that gap-toothed grin, perched on my lap. I picked up the suitcase, packed last night. A few clothes, my medications, a photo album chronicling our family's life. I slipped the letter for Lucas into my coat pocket. Before leaving, I ran my hand over his picture one last time. Goodbye, my boy, I whispered. The taxi arrived promptly at 6. The driver, an older man with kind graying hair, helped me with my bag. Where to, ma'am? Main post office first, then the bus terminal. On the way, I watched the city stir. Coffee shops unlocking their doors, first buses rumbling, People rushing, clutching their morning cups. Life, indifferent and relentless, moving on. At the post office, I mailed the letter to Lucas. Registered to ensure it found its way. The clock's stamp felt like a seal on my own fate. At the bus terminal, I bought a ticket to Riverbend South, my sister Brenda's small town. 2 hours until departure. I sank onto a plastic bench, my suitcase at my feet, and closed my eyes. The flashbacks began then, vivid, as if unfolding in that very moment. It was a Sunday afternoon. Lucas, 7 years old. We were in the backyard of my old house, beneath the sprawling oak Arthur had planted the day we moved in. "Grandma, how do the stars stay up without falling?" Lucas asked, sprawled on the grass, gazing at the bright daytime sky. "It's gravity, honey. The same force that makes an apple fall from a tree." "But then why does the apple fall and the star doesn't?" I smiled at his innocent logic. "It's complicated, Lucas. You'll understand when you're older." He sat up, his eyes alight with fierce curiosity. "I want to understand everything, Grandma. Everything in the world. That's why you need to study hard, to understand how things work." "I'll study so hard I'll even know how to explain why the stars don't fall," he promised, utterly determined. That same night, when Amanda came to pick him up, Lucas clung to me. "5 more minutes, Mom. Grandma's teaching me about the stars." Amanda gave me that look. "It's late, Lucas. Your dad's waiting for dinner." "But, Mom?" "Lucas. Now." He squeezed me tight before he left, whispering in my ear. "Next week you'll tell me more about the stars, Grandma." "Of course, my love. Grandma will always be here to tell you about the stars." As they walked away, I heard Amanda's low murmur to him. "Your grandma doesn't know anything about stars, Lucas. She didn't even finish high school." Another memory surfaced, more recent. Lucas had just started college. I'd only been in the small apartment a few weeks. It was his 19th birthday. I baked a simple cake, bought him the anatomy textbook he'd mentioned, and I waited. He'd promised to stop by after class. Hours bled into night. The sky darkened. I called his cell, again and again. Only voicemail. At 9, a text. "Sorry, Grandma. College friends threw a surprise party. I'll stop by another day." I stared at the cake on the table, candles unlit, the carefully wrapped present. A knot tightened in my throat, but I swallowed the tears. "He's making friends. That's good," I whispered to myself. 3 days later, Facebook flashed photos of the party. Lucas, beaming, arm in arm with new friends in improvised lab coats. Amanda, radiant beside her son. And Chris, my own son, capturing the celebration. No one had invited me. That night, I wept alone. Not from anger, but from a profound sadness. A slow, agonizing erasure from their lives. The third flashback, just a year ago. Lucas, junior year. I just left the bank, having paid his tuition, as I did every month. On the sidewalk, I ran into Brenda, my daughter. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Came to pay Lucas's tuition," I said, tucking the receipt into my purse. Brenda shook her head, a storm brewing in her eyes. "Mom, you can't keep doing this. You barely have enough for yourself." "I'm fine, darling. Don't worry." "No, you're not. Look at you. You're wasting away. Your clothes are threadbare, and I bet you're skimping on food." I averted my gaze. It was true. Sometimes 1 meal a day was all I allowed myself. "It's my choice, Brenda. And Lucas? Does he even thank you? Does he know about your sacrifices?" "He doesn't need to thank me. He's my grandson. I do it out of love." Brenda took my hands, her eyes brimming. Mom, love isn't just about giving. It's about receiving, too. And Lucas, he gives you nothing back. Not even respect. He's busy, honey. College is hard. Too busy to call the grandma who sold her own house to pay for his studies? That's not busy, Mom. That's ingratitude. Her words stung, a bitter truth I knew deep down. But to admit it would be to betray my own heart. You don't understand, Brenda. When Lucas graduates, everything will change. He'll understand the sacrifices, he'll appreciate it. Brenda hugged me fiercely, as if to shield me from myself. I just don't want you to get hurt anymore, Mom. You've given so much to all of us. The last flashback, the most agonizing. 3 months ago, moments after my diagnosis. I'd stumbled from the doctor's office, legs like jelly, clutching the test results. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 to 12 months. I walked aimlessly, the news a lead weight in my gut. My feet, unbidden, carried me to the medical school. I stopped before the imposing white building, staring at the windows, imagining Lucas inside. Then I saw him, emerging from the main gate with a group of friends, laughing, utterly carefree, backpack slung over his shoulder. So young, so vibrant. My grandson, my boy. I almost called his name, almost ran to him to pull him close, to tell him I was dying, that I needed him now more than ever. But then, Amanda pulled up in her new car, waving. Lucas waved goodbye to his friends, walked to his mother. They chatted animatedly, then got in the car and drove off. I stood there, rooted to the sidewalk, the fatal diagnosis folded in my pocket, watching my grandson disappear without a glance. In that moment, the decision solidified. I wouldn't tell anyone. Why? To be a burden? To be visited out of obligation, out of pity? I would leave in silence, leaving only what was good. Or so I believed that day. Ma'am, are you feeling well? The bus terminal security guard's voice pulled me back. I realized tears were silently tracing paths down my wrinkled face. I'm fine, thank you, I managed, dabbing my eyes with a tissue. Just remembering old things. I glanced at the terminal clock. Still an hour until my bus. An hour to leave behind the city where I'd lived my entire life, where I'd loved, suffered, raised my children, buried my husband, and where now I was burying my last, fragile hopes. That's when I heard it. A voice calling my name. Grandma Susan! I spun around, convinced it was a phantom. But no. Lucas was sprinting through the terminal, breathless, his face flushed from the exertion. Behind him, my son, Chris. Lucas skidded to a halt before me, hands on his knees, gasping for air. Grandma. Oh, thank God. We found you. I stood there, utterly bewildered. How? How did they know? Lucas? Chris? What are you doing here? Chris stepped closer, a familiar envelope clutched in his hand. My letter. You left this on the kitchen table, Mom. Mrs. Henderson called me, worried. Said you left with a suitcase this morning. I stared at the envelope, a wave of confusion washing over me. I'd been so certain I'd tucked it into my coat pocket. I touched the fabric. Empty. In the morning's frantic rush, I must have left it. Lucas dropped to his knees before me, eyes rimmed red, his hands trembling as they enveloped mine. Grandma, why didn't you tell us? Why were you just leaving like this, without a word? We read the letter, Mom, Chris interjected, his voice thick with unshed tears. About the cancer, about everything. My head reeled. This wasn't how it was meant to unfold. They weren't supposed to see me like this, fragile, sick, pathetic. I didn't want to be a burden. I mumbled, my gaze fixed on the scuffed floor. Lucas squeezed my hands tighter. A burden? Grandma? You could never be a burden. I lifted my eyes to his, the hurt finally overflowing. That's not what you said that day, Lucas. That old woman, draining my energy, shouldn't even be alive. Those were your exact words. Lucas went stark white. Tears began to carve paths down his young face. I didn't know what I was saying, Grandma. I was angry, frustrated, but not with you. With myself. With myself? I echoed, bewildered. Lucas nodded, wiping his tears with his shirt sleeve. I feel like such a failure, Grandma. You sold your house for me, sacrificed everything, and I can't even be the grandson you deserve. Son. No, Grandma, please. Let me speak. I'm ashamed. Not of you. Never of you. I'm ashamed of me. Of not being able to give back everything you've done. Of not being good enough. Lucas, you're more than good enough. You're everything I ever dreamed of. He shook his head, unconvinced. You don't understand. At college, all the other students, their parents are doctors. They come from money. And me? I'm the scholarship kid. The one who's only there because his grandma sold her house. They make jokes, Grandma. They say I'll never be like them. So that was it. All this time, my grandson had been wrestling with his own demons, feeling inferior, inadequate. And instead of reaching out, trying to understand, I had simply assumed he was pushing me away. Is that why you wanted to transfer? To run away? Lucas nodded, his shame palpable. I thought it'd be easier to start fresh somewhere else, where no one knew my story. But when I read your letter today, when I found out about your illness, I realized I was just repeating the same mistake. Running when I should be facing things head-on. Chris, who'd stood silent until now, stepped forward, a hand resting on his son's shoulder. Lucas was at the hospital all night, Mom. After we read your letter, he consulted several oncologists. There are experimental treatments, new therapies. Pancreatic cancer isn't the death sentence it once was. Expensive treatments, I murmured, remembering the empty balance in my own account. The money you gave me, Lucas declared, his voice firm. We're using it for your treatment, not my transfer. But college? I'm staying right where I am. I'm gonna face it, Grandma. For me, and for you. I looked at my grandson, at my son, and felt a flicker I hadn't known in years. Hope. Not for a miraculous cure. I was realistic about my chances. But hope that perhaps there was still time to mend the deeper wounds, the ones of the heart. And Amanda? I asked, a ghost of my daughter-in-law's presence still lingering between us. Lucas and Chris exchanged a glance. Mom and Dad are separating, Grandma, Lucas revealed, his voice barely a whisper. It's been a few months now. What? Why? Chris sighed, a heavy sound. Amanda. She's been seeing someone else, Mom. For a while. I only found out recently. So that was it. That was the weight Lucas had carried these past months. Not just the pressure of med school, or his own shame. His family, crumbling around him. Why didn't you tell me? We didn't want to worry you, Mom, Chris replied. And then, well, Lucas and I weren't exactly talking either. Lucas hung his head. I pulled away from everyone, Grandma. From Dad, from you. I thought it'd be easier to handle everything alone. But I just got more lost. Just then the PA system crackled, announcing my bus. We all looked towards the boarding gate, then at each other. Don't go, Mom! Chris pleaded, his voice raw. Stay. We'll face this together. Please, Grandma, Lucas begged, clutching my hands. I need you. I always have. I looked at the two men in my life. My son, whom I'd raised alone after Arthur departed. My grandson, for whom I'd given everything. Both imperfect, flawed, so utterly human. But both here, now, asking me to stay, to not give up on them, or on myself. All right, I finally breathed, an enormous weight dissolving from my shoulders. I'll stay. Lucas pulled me into a fierce hug, tighter than he had in years. I felt his tears wet my shoulder, heard his muffled sobs. Forgive me, Grandma. Forgive me for everything. There's nothing to forgive, my son. True love holds no grudges. Chris joined the embrace, the three of us entwined in a knot of raw emotion, regret, forgiveness, and most of all, love. That imperfect, sometimes agonizing love, but in the end, the only thing that truly matters. We walked out of the bus station together, my small suitcase a silent companion between us. On the way home, not my solitary apartment, but Chris's house, where I'd stay now, Lucas reached for my hand in the back seat. Grandma, remember when I was little and I asked you why the stars don't fall from the sky? I smiled, surprised he remembered. I do. Now I know the answer. Stars don't fall because they're exactly where they're meant to be. In the perfect place, at the perfect distance, fulfilling their purpose. He squeezed my hand, his eyes glistening with tears and a profound love. You're my star, Grandma. Always have been. And I almost let you fall. In that moment, I finally understood. Love is never truly wasted. It might wander, hide behind hurt and misunderstanding. But if it's real, it always finds its way home. I don't know how much time I have left. The cancer remains, relentless. But now I'm not fighting this battle alone. And whether I leave in 6 months or 6 years, I'll go knowing I was loved. That my sacrifices weren't in vain. That my grandson, my Lucas, finally understood that love isn't a prison, but the deepest, most liberating form of freedom. And that, in the end, is all I ever needed to know.